Today, we're diving into a mystery that kind of haunts the modern office. Why do so many of our performance reviews just feel, well, completely broken?
You know that feeling, right? You've worked hard all year, you've collaborated with your team, but then review time comes around, and suddenly it feels like you're not being measured on your own work but against everyone else. Like for you to win, somebody else has to lose.
Well, let me tell you, that anxiety is not just in your head. It's the lingering spirit of a really controversial management system that, for a lot of companies, never really went away. So let's pull back the curtain and finally meet this ghost.
Okay, so what are we actually talking about here? We're talking about a system called forced ranking, sometimes known as the Vitality Curve. It was made famous, or maybe infamous, back in the 1980s by Jack Welch, the legendary CEO of General Electric. His goal? To forge a super high-performance culture through some pretty intense internal competition.
And the system itself was, well, brutally simple. Managers were forced, and that's the key word, to sort their teams into this exact distribution every single year. You had the top 20%, your A players, who got all the rewards and promotions. Then you had the huge middle 70%, the B players, who were told to keep up the good work. And then you have the bottom 10%, the C players, who were often just shown the door.
Yeah, this whole process earned it a much more descriptive nickname, rank and yank. See, it wasn't really about meeting a certain standard or hitting a goal. It was all about not being the last one across the finish line. And the consequence for being in that bottom 10% was severe, to say the least.
Now, you might be thinking, wow, that sounds absolutely terrible. Surely nobody does this anymore. And you'd be kind of right. While the explicit, official use of this system has plummeted, its ghost is still around. That core idea, pitting employees against each other for a limited number of good ratings, it still quietly haunts a lot of modern performance systems.
So, let's dig into the first major piece of evidence against this system, its absolutely devastating effect on teamwork.
This quote just nails the core problem, doesn't it? I mean, why on earth would you go out of your way to help a colleague if you know their success could directly lead to your negative rating? It creates this toxic dilemma, and it's a dilemma people face every single day under a system like this.
And the results are exactly what you'd expect. And they're so destructive. Instead of sharing information, people start to hoard it. Instead of helping each other out, some might even resort to outright sabotage. It just creates a culture of fear, stress, and burnout. And it completely erodes the trust that great teams are supposed to be built on. And this leads to an even bigger problem. Real game-changing innovation requires what we call psychological safety. The freedom to take risks, to try new things, and yeah, even to fail sometimes. But when your only goal is to avoid being in the bottom 10%, you stop taking any of those creative risks. This is a huge reason why a company like Microsoft, for example, eventually had to abandon the practice.
But this is where it gets really strange. This leads to one of the most self-defeating, kind of backwards parts of the entire system, the way it actually punishes your best people.
Seriously, just think about it for a second. Let's say you've done an amazing job hiring. You've built a team of absolute superstars. Everyone is crushing their goals. Everyone is exceeding expectations. So what does a forced ranking system do with that?
It forces the manager to label 10% of those very same superstars as underperformers. You literally have to take great employees and tell them they're failing just to meet some arbitrary quota. Can you imagine how demoralizing that is? It just destroys the very high-performance team you were trying to build in the first place.
Okay, so if the cultural damage wasn't enough to convince you, the system's entire foundation is built on a statistical mistake. And as you might guess, that has led to some major courtroom drama.
So the whole system assumes that talent fits a nice, neat bell curve, with a few low performers, a few high performers, and most people in the middle. But research shows that in modern work, especially knowledge work, performance actually follows what's called a power law. A tiny number of hyperachievers deliver a massive, outsized amount of value, while most other folks are solid, valuable contributors. Forcing a bell curve on that reality just totally misrepresents how work actually gets done and ends up punishing really good employees. The subjective nature of all this ranking, often disguised as objective data, has also proven to be a legal minefield. And we are not talking about small risks here. Ford had to pay out $10.5 million to settle discrimination lawsuits that were tied directly to its ranking system. And it wasn't just Ford. This was not a one-off thing.
Major companies from Goodyear all the way to Microsoft have been sued over claims that forced ranking just became a convenient tool for discrimination, which caused immense legal and reputational damage.
So the case against it is pretty clear. Forced ranking damages collaboration, it punishes top teams, and its entire foundation is flawed and legally risky. Which, of course, begs the question, what's the alternative? Where do we go from here?
Well, the answer really lies in a complete shift in mindset. Instead of this constant judgment and internal competition, the focus has to move to continuous growth. And not just for individuals, but for the entire team, the entire system.
And that really leaves us with one final, crucial question to think about. If we all basically agree that the goal of performance management should be to help people and organizations grow, why do so many of our systems still feel like they're designed just to pass judgment?